Hi, I'm Warren.
And I'm Adam, and we work for the Sanguine Writing House, which is the UK's leading provider of online and in-person strategy and team building games.
And this is the next episode of Minefield. And in today's show, we're joined by Charlie Bethal, who's the Chief Officer of Men's Sheds. So welcome, Charlie. Thank you for your time today. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and Men's Sheds, if you would?
Yeah, sure. Hi, and thanks for having me on. I work for UK Men's Sheds, which are not wooden boxes, although we do talk about the fantastic transformational nature of wooden boxes or sheds. Men's sheds are effectively workshops. They're spaces for men to go and make stuff, do stuff, and that can be upcycling. It can be repurposing. It can be taking things apart and trying to put them back together again. But by having that space, men and indeed women are able to make something for themselves, for the community, for their friends, for their family. And in doing so, it has an incredible transformational impact on lives. Why do they work? We use an analogy, which is if you put 12 men in a room and ask them to talk about themselves, and it has to be a square room, 6 will leave immediately, and 6 will try to find the corners of the room because men don't like talking about themselves generally, and definitely don't like talking about feelings. However, if you put a lawnmower in the middle of the room and ask them to fix it, in 2 hours, they will know each other intimately. They'll know how they take their tea, their coffee, the names of their children or grandchildren, and also what ails them. And you might, or you might not, get a fixed lawnmower. But for sure, there'll be some nuts and screws left over on the sides, which is always the case. But, so that's a shed. And it builds upon the idea that men will talk shoulder to shoulder about their feelings or about what's worrying them. Rather than face to face. There's some research now in America which suggests that the endorphins are released in a woman's brain when they make a friendship group generally, but that doesn't happen in a man's mind. And so that, that's one reason. The other reason is we're generally quite miserable and happy with being miserable at the age of 23 onwards. Miserable men, it starts early and continues. But there's some, joking aside, there's some evidence now of why we don't behave in the same way as women. And we're also in a culture of manning up and, big boys don't cry. So we don't talk about our feelings. And whilst that's changing at a younger age, maybe it's still not changing completely. And it definitely isn't there when you look at the older groups of men particularly.
Yeah, I suppose because as well, I think as you get older, finding friendship groups is harder to do, isn't it? I struggle with that.
Yeah, very much. And there's a number of factors again. So, it might not resonate with everyone, but I moved to the village where my wife grew up, and we moved here because my wife's mother wasn't very well. And so the friendship groups of mine, who are dotted around the country, in fairness, from when I was at college, but they're all over the place. And so it's not the same. They're not my friendship groups necessarily here as they were when I was back at home. And so that's part of it. We do that. But also, where do you go? If it's not going down the pub for a drink, where do men congregate? It could be sport, but not everybody does sport. And then not everybody is well enough or injury-free enough to do sport. And it's not the same just going and watching because you're on the edge of a basketball court or a football pitch. And it's not the same camaraderie and engagement that you might get if you were playing five-a-side football or a bit of 3x3 basketball or something. And then there are sports that are pretty lonely anyway. Jogging can be quite lonely, swimming, they're not known for their social circles, I don't think.
Yeah. So how did it start? What are the origins of men's sheds, Charlie?
Right. So, as somebody involved in sport in my past life and still, I would say that it's not Australian and that we invented it in the 60s with a charity called Sons of Men, or a group called Sons of Man. But in reality, it came from Australia. It's an Australian idea. And they were looking at men on the farms, living on their own, high suicide, high alcoholism rates. And different culture in Australia, but they weren't communicating. Men weren't coming together. Quite lonely lifestyles. So they developed the sheds as a concept. And in Australia, there are well over 950 sheds that are open. Some of them are hangars. In fact, quite a lot of them. So they've got a reasonable amount of space. But they build boats and they build all sorts of things there. And so that concept came over. Here, the first shed opened in 2009. The association I work for started in 2013 as a group, became a charity in 15, but we started just over 9 years ago. And the idea is that sheds are generally autonomous. So some sheds follow a model where somebody employs somebody to support that shed. Our approach, which is in the majority and the more sustainable approaches, is that we support that shed to be set up. We support it with advice, knowledge, volunteers that help. And then that shed is owned by the members, supported by the members, developed by the members. So they've got the skin in the game, really, and they raise money for it, find the venue, which is one of the more challenging aspects of setting up a shed. And then they do as they want as a group. So if they want to make 800 robins to support the local community, or 75 bird boxes or bug hotels, or if they want to make a ship or a coracle or a coffin, that's what they do. They're charitable by the nature of what they do, supporting the community, supporting each other, and we see fantastic results. We did a survey with over 500 shedders. 96% of those that said they were lonely before joining a shed said they were no longer lonely. And in a similar way, 88% more connected to the community. 97% made new friends. So 3% are still over there and not wanting to make friends, but everybody else is moving in that direction, which is a good movement. 75% reduction in depression and 89% reduction in anxiety. So huge impact, although that being a self-declaration one. We have now got an external piece of research going on, but that is showing at least a 50% reduction of loneliness from everybody that's being asked. So, huge impact.
That's amazing. That truly is amazing. I suppose because it works on many different levels as well, doesn't it? Because like I say, because you've got a group of people who by nature just become friends and with a shared kind of interest. But then you've got that massive sense of accomplishment if, when you're doing something for your community, or, you're fixing things, and your own self-worth just becomes more.
And that is huge. And it's exactly that. I mean, people go for different reasons. It works for different reasons, but predominantly it's also like creating. It's whether, I don't know if there's a God particle within ourselves that, that it's that creating, it's that ability to make something, and that self-worth. And also, helping somebody in the community, helping a school. I mean, one shed recently, they won an award with us at our shed awards, and they made 17 glockenspiels, and then they played them in front of the, and they cut the metal and drilled it so that it all played the different notes, and they gave them then to the school, and they made a playground for the school. So that sense of achievement, helping the next generation. But you see it all the way through, whether it's painting fences, helping out a neighbor or somebody in the community. It's huge. But one of the reasons it also works, so there's that self-rewarding of creating and helping somebody else. But also, when you cut a piece of wood, or if you turn a wooden bowl, you're concentrating on that, because if you don't concentrate on that, then you can't cut it properly and you can't cut a straight line. And when you do that, you forget about being lonely, or you forget about your money troubles, or you forget about whatever it is. And there was a shedder in his 80s who lost his wife, and his children found out, children, grown adults found out about men's sheds, got him involved in one, and the guy was telling me, he was in tears, telling me how the shed had been so accepting, had been so supportive of him, and he later on was on the radio saying, that he could forget about being lonely, and that really is part of the essence. And another that we quote with one of our campaigns to help prevent suicide was a daughter, and her father had been working on his life. They were in Scotland, which isn't where he was from originally. But when he gave up work and retired, his wife developed dementia, and then he was lonely for the first time in his life, lonely because his wife was no longer really there. And then when she later on went into care, and again completely lost, and she wrote to us and thanked us for giving her back her dad, because the shed gave that back, gave him his life back. And he's an incredible volunteer for us and for that shed in Scotland. So absolutely transformational. And people say sheds are adding years to life and life to years, or therapy that dare not speak its name. But it's a very non-invasive way. It's not tell me how you feel. Let's talk about your feelings. How did that affect you? It's the guys happily opening up about that, and also around health conditions. So sheds are often, we partner with Prostate Cancer UK and other organisations who want people to have the conversation around those conditions. And again, a shed recently told us a case study where one guy had been losing his sight in one eye for 38 years. And when it had eventually gone, the shed has turned around and said, right, okay, we're going to sort this out for you now. This isn't acceptable. Got him, researched it for him, found out what he could do, and he's now fully sighted. 38 years of eye deterioration. And, the miracle cure was the fact that somebody gave a monkeys about him and found it out, had the tools, had the skill set, which is no disrespect to anybody else in that guy's family, but they were able to do it and approach it in a different way. Yeah. And he's happily sighted. So, it's not a miracle cure for everyone, but it's part of the picture of positive mental health and well-being.
Yeah. And I suppose when you're doing it as well, like you said, it takes your focus off, because when we're experiencing and we're going through things like mental ill health, you become very kind of blinkered and you focus on yourself, don't you? And kind of with the focus of, I'm doing this for the community, I'm doing this with other people, I'm doing this with kind of my brothers, or it's that you're not focusing inwards anymore. You're kind of looking outwards, and you're looking at what's going on in the community and what you can do for others, and that is the transformational bit, isn't it?
Yeah, and it stops that, because you become self-deprecating, and the tunnel that you go down on depression. Hopefully it swings you out at one of those levels and back up again. Maybe will never be the cure, and it's very complex, mental health and our minds work. But it does give you that respite, and hopefully that respite can help you then build your resilience,
Absolutely.
so that you can continue. And and if we look at the dark side of where suicide happens, one of the first sheds in the UK, the door was open, they were building the shed inside, they were setting it up, and this guy turns up and he just wouldn't stop talking. And after 3 months, the people that were involved tell us that he turned to them and said, I was going to kill myself before I came here. And he was basically living on, whether it was £5 a week or £5 a day. He was mending his own shoes, and he'd had a disagreement for whatever reason with the DSS. And so he was on a lot less money than he maybe should have been on. And so the shed helped him see that there was another purpose in his life, another route through. He no longer goes to the shed. He's got a job, he's got a house, he's living life again. And I think that's so powerful. And we hear it time and time again. We launched a charter the other day, back in March, and sheds and people in general, public and companies, are allowed, invited to sign up to it. And one shed gave an example where one of their shedders stood up and said, you know, if I wasn't here in the shed, I wouldn't be here anymore. And it just shows the power and the strength of what the shed does. And that takes a lot for somebody to admit that, to say that that's where they were and that was their place. And we developed this, and we talk about, you know, where do men go? There was a guy, his wife approached us. He died through suicide, and he was depressed. He had depression, and he managed that through playing football and golf. And he broke his leg playing football. So that route, that medication was removed from him, and his wife was with him while he was in hospital. She was conscious of his position. The day that he found out that he would be another year before he could play football again, he did a click and collect, bought a rope, and 30 minutes later he'd ended his life. And so his wife came to us quite cross, you know, like about the ability that you can buy a rope and there isn't that health warning on it. But also, she said, you know, if only we'd have known about men's sheds, he might still be with us. And so we created a charter from this, a charter to challenge the craft and DIY sector about thinking about well-being. And it could be that you provide Zero Suicide Alliance training to all of your staff. You know, it doesn't cost anything. It's 30 minutes. It's online. It's about creating awareness of your colleagues and of yourself and how the language to use when talking about suicide. But it could be that you use men's sheds as a non-invasive way of promoting well-being as well to your employees or to people as they're coming through retirement, or even in your shop. And actually, if a pop-up had come up about men's sheds when somebody was buying that rope, it might make them click on it and see what men's sheds is about, because they say that when people are planning their suicide, it's done in advance, and you know, but not always the case. And it might be that kind of intervention works, but we're aware that when somebody's in that place, it probably might be too late at that point. But if we can go and promote men's sheds in places where men gather, and so it might not be, and these are stereotypes, so I apologise, but it might not be the paint oil aisle, but it might be the oil aisle or the screw aisle or the power tools. That if there's imagery around men's sheds, that might speak to the male audience better than a Samaritan sticker or a you know, something that's directly linked to mental health. And you know, that, don't get me wrong, that their signage and imagery works very well, particularly around the railways. But if you're trying to sell ropes, it's not, the retailer and the manufacturer aren't going to be very happy with a badge potentially. But actually, if men's sheds can create that conversation, or somebody clicks on it and sees what well-being opportunities are out there, then we can assist in that. So that's our that's our plan, and that's what we're trying to.
It's getting that conversation out there, isn't it? You know, it's getting the awareness that, you know, for men to start talking, for men to see, and women, other options than suicide. You know, because I think suicide becomes an option because people, I mean, this is just kind of one that people don't see any other option, and they think that, you know, suicide is a way out, and you know, there are other ways out, you know, and if, like you say, we can get the conversation between men, you know, where they can access support, or where they can go and have those conversations, then it's that kind of awareness that's needed, isn't it?
Yeah, and people are worth so much more. You know, even if we don't realise it ourselves, you know, everyone is worth so much more, and the contribution they can make to their families or to society and to themselves. So, you know, it's hugely important. And, you know, we hope with the charter that it will save at least one life. We've some really impressive partners that have come on as a result of that, in terms of promoting the charter and engaging with Zero Suicide Alliance, for instance, with their staff. And then there are other partners there as well. So, you know, it's huge. And actually, you can have fun doing it. You know, the best description I heard about men's sheds was soft play for men. And it's, you know, soft play with a grinder and a bandsaw, but it's but it really is. It's it's transformational. And most people who go to sheds don't realise, whether they've been lonely or had mental health challenges or anxiety or anxious, and anxiety, but and it's only afterwards when we ask the question, were you lonely before you joined the shed? And it might be, well, yeah, actually I was. And then we get some referrals. There are some people, one shed has set up a dementia shed where on one day a week for a couple of hours, people with dementia go along to that, partnered with an Alzheimer's charity, and they contribute to the projects that the bigger sheds doing or make their own as well. And with the support they get, that they use power tools, and that's not the norm in most sheds, but as sheds develop and grow, there's over 820 open sheds at the moment, another 200 in development. We're trying to encourage those kind of activities that allow you to keep the culture within your shed, but also have other days that can support other communities. And it's worth mentioning, the women are in a number of sheds, not all sheds. We promote men-only sessions, but if you want to be fully inclusive, and that's great. It really does add value in some sheds, and in other sheds it doesn't add value, and it causes conflict. And lunch breaks in sheds are very often enforced, and it's to allow those in the shed to talk. And men will sit back and let some of the weaker ones that don't talk as much, maybe less confident rather than weaker, to talk. And so we did have one shed phone us and say, how do we stop the women talking in our lunch breaks, because they won't shut up. And I said, well, what would you do if it was a guy? Well, we tell him to shut up. And he used a little bit more coarse language than that. And so I said, well, maybe, can you do that with the women? Absolutely not. So we'll maybe take them to the side and explain that time is to let everybody speak, and it's not to fill the spaces, so let somebody that, is lacking that confidence, give them that space to say something. So it's important learning that sheds share across with each other. And that's part of our role, is to pass that on. But that's one way of dealing with it. In other sheds, the women are completely understand and get it, and do all of those things as part of what they want to do. And there are also women-only sessions for sheds as well, and women sheds. So it is there as an option. But we want to keep men in the title, and we get some criticism sometimes, but. If we can't have that conversation by having men in the title around suicide rates, around the fact that there is no male health strategy. I discovered today that the government's invested in men's sheds, which was interesting, because we're fully unaware of that. So in fairness, they may be doing a pilot somewhere with another shed, but not, we've not been informed or asked for support of that. So, there is a need for investment to support sheds, but also there's a lot of sharing that goes on between them, and to learn that journey. But men, yes, we need that in our title, because, the health service, I think it was the Mental Health Forum were told that there was no need for a men's health strategy because the NHS was written for men. Well, if that's the case, why is the suicide rate as high as it is? Why? That's
ridiculous.
Why do we have to look at things like 9 in 10 men not wanting to go to the doctor? 76% of suicides being men. Ridiculous numbers. And in COVID, you look at what we do for a living generally. So men were hit more. And at every level, I understand as well, men die earlier than women, to percentage-wise. It's not 50-50 until we get old. It's all across the board. So, we really do need to highlight men and deal with it head on, as you would with any other challenge.
Absolutely.
We don't talk about it. We talk about cancer. We talk about traffic accidents. We don't talk about suicide being the biggest single killer of men.
People don't want to talk about it, do they?
No.
Yeah, it's a dirty subject, and people just try and sweep it away. Obviously, what you're doing here is just, I'm blown away. I think it's absolutely amazing. So obviously, you said you've got 800 sheds currently with another 200
in development.
in development. If somebody listening to this wants to get involved and needs to find or wants to find a local shed, how do they go about that? What would be the best way for them to find a shed?
So the easiest way is our website, where it's men'ssheds.org.uk, and on there is a Find a Shed app. It's very close to the front. Find a Shed. You type in your postcode, and you press enter. You press search. Sorry, and you have to remember that, because I always type in the postcode, click enter, nothing happens. You have to click on the search button. It needs changing because of imbeciles like me. And then that will come up with all your local sheds. And also remember that when a shed is in development, it might be that they're meeting anyway as a group. It might be that they're converting a church crypt, or a disused church, or a disused building somewhere into a shed. So already the activity of being a shed is happening. You might not be able to go there and just turn wooden bowls, but you can help shape that shed as it goes forward. It could be that group doesn't have a property, but they're going and fixing fences in the community, or painting walls for the local council. So again, all of these things are incredibly beneficial in a passive way. It might be that you're not practically minded and you want to just help do the books, or help with recruitment on part of it. And I have to say, before I got this job, I went to visit a couple of sheds, and I did see a bird table with screws and nails sticking out, and I wasn't so sure from a health and safety for birds perspective that it would be the best thing in the world. But the delight that person had, and when they made that was incredible. It's just like, you can undo those. When they're not looking.
There's something tangible though, isn't it? I think as men, if you've created something and fixed something, there's that sense of kind of pride, isn't there, within men, that I did that, and working with your hands, and like you said, conversation happens. Myself and Warren have done it before. We made a load of Christmas trees out of pallet wood one year. In my garage, just because it was an opportunity to meet up. But I think we had more conversation and more kind of chat, just doing and working, and the sense of, they weren't very good and weren't very sellable, but the sense of pride and achievement was there.
We had a better time than when we just go and have a pint, didn't we? It was I got loads out of it. I just loved it. Even just sitting there sanding some wood, I thought it was just therapeutic in itself.
No, it is, and it's and you see that finished product. I mean, sometimes it's frustrating, don't get me wrong, and but you can usually create something out of anything. And I remember as a child knocking 2 blocks of wood together and calling it a boat, and showing it to the neighbours, and them all humouring me. But it's it is incredibly therapeutic. I mean, a number of sheds will have safe benches if they have got members with dementia, and that's where the sanding down happens, and you see their mood lift. You see that every shed reports about the person with dementia, their mood lifting, and them being in a better place. So it is incredible, and I think the difference between this and there are other therapies. There's art therapy, and and people will just go and paint or make jewelry. But I think the difference, one of our funders told me off once for comparing it to art class, and she said, well, the difference is that if you're in an art class, you might be next to Rembrandt or Picasso, and then you get downhearted with what you've produced. Whereas if you're sanding down a piece of wood or making a bird box, they're quite simple or relatively simple, even a Christmas tree from pallet wood, to actually create. The thing with pallet wood is to make sure that you take the nails out.
That's it.
Having trod on a couple in the past. So
if somebody wanted to offer up a venue or make a donation, they can go on the website and do that.
Yeah, you can go on the website. So there's that. There's also a number of sheds will help. If somebody's lost a loved one that has a shed full of tools, the shed will come and help clear it as well. And those tools will go and help their shed or another shed. So they don't generally sell them on. Some sheds then donate to projects in Africa. Sometimes those metals are worth money in Africa for, making tools, particularly toughened steel and things. So, but generally sheds will lend them to their new sheds setting up next door and then give them to them. So sheds are incredibly generous in terms of supporting each other. It's my background sport, and one sports club wouldn't certainly not share resources given to them with a neighbouring club. But in men's sheds, they'll share an application as well, and where they got their money from and what they actually said to help the shed next door, because they see that benefit as helping everyone. It does really lack competitiveness, whilst there's always competitiveness within the shed of what you're making, and we see some incredible things created, but generally with humility from the shedders as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It's just an amazing organisation, I think, and the work that it's doing is amazing. Yeah. So
well, I say, even if you just had one of those stories that you've told us, it's a massive success. But story upon story of success it's phenomenal. It truly is. I would recommend anybody get involved. I think you get so much out of it, and you'll be able to give so much back as well. I think it's just a win-win all round.
Yeah, and it's helping the other guys in the shed. It might be that that you being there enables that shed to stay open that day, and therefore Fred and John, who need it for other reasons, are able to fulfil their lives as well. Yeah. And there was great camaraderie as well over lockdown of them all supporting each other, and some were able to stay open, particularly after the first lockdowns. But the tremendous jobs that they're doing.
That's great. Yeah, well, I think thank you for joining us, Charlie. It's been an amazing experience chatting to you. I as Warren said, urge people to go and have a look at the website, see what you do, see how they can get involved, see how you can donate, if you have a venue to offer up, anything like that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. It's been great chatting.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Warren. Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Hopefully we'll have you on again. And then again, thank you so much for that. And just a quick reminder to everybody watching, I think next week's show we're going to be joined by Cy Donnelly, and we're going to be talking about a local group called Talk Yourselves Well. So again, thank you, Charlie. It's been amazing, and we'll see everybody next week.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
The Minefield podcast has been presented by the Sanguine Writing House, the UK's leading provider of online mystery and strategy games, along with team training, mental health awareness, and mental health first aid courses. To find out more and to book your course or game, please visit tswh.co.uk.